All right, welcome back to the PCC podcast. And today we are going to be talking about mistakes that rookie coaches make in the fitness industry. And this is going to hopefully shed some light on maybe your past coaching experiences or what you see in the industry just on social media, online, and give you some more clarity on how to look for the right people to hire in this industry. And just to give you guys some background, how I feel like I'm very well qualified to talk about this because not only have I been in the industry for 10 years and online exclusively for 10 years. But at the same time, I've just made all of these mistakes. I've made every single one of them. And I think hindsight is always 2020 and you can only really teach on something when you've kind of been there, done that and know better. So I'm going to explain to you what are all the mistakes that rookie coaches make and what is the actual flip side of like how should it look, right? And hopefully if you're listening to this, you're either a client of ours and you're understanding more about how we coach and why we coach the way that we do and how it's going to benefit you as a client, or you're a prospective client, you're someone who is thinking about hiring us here at PCC. Maybe you've had a coach or two before and you're trying to understand, what is different about hiring people with more experience in the industry. So just for some background, right? I gave you my timeline of how long I've been in the industry, but our two assistant coaches on the team currently have 8 years of online experience and 6 years of online experience specifically. So combined, we have 24 years of online experience. Wow, that's crazy. So I'm really honored to be able to combine all of that with the knowledge that we have and give you guys what we are working on with our clients. So let's talk about some simple ones first. And so I would say one of the most common things from a well-intentioned rookie coach is called information dumping. And this happens because coaches love helping people and they honestly like most of the time have really good intentions. And so you'll know that this was happening to you or is happening to you if you feel like you're like learning a lot of science and information and tools, but the follow through on your end isn't necessarily happening. So, for example, you're learning about all the different kinds of foods that have different kinds of fiber, and you're learning the difference between soluble and insoluble fiber. You're learning the recovery process of your muscles in between workouts, but you're not necessarily getting more consistent with your workouts, or you're not actually hitting your fiber target. If that is the case, then your coach is probably info dumping. And info dumping is exactly what it sounds like, giving a lot of information and science. And the reason that this doesn't work is because clients don't hire coaches to become coaches. They hire coaches to get results. And so getting results is almost entirely dependent on the client's follow through on the plan rather than the knowledge that they accrue over time. And so a lot of people will have an online coaching experience and say, I learned a lot, but I didn't necessarily get to where I want to go, or I got there, but I didn't stay there, right? And this can come from information dumping. What you should actually experience instead is you should still be learning about, these principles of protein and fiber. And it is sometimes helpful to understand the deeper, nitty gritty of how these things work, but in simpler terms than the actual science. And more importantly, what you should really be learning about in a coaching process is yourself, your patterns, your behaviors, your triggers, the things that trip you up, your tendencies, and learning how to actually overcome those. And so, coaching should help you feel like you're an expert on yourself, not an expert on fitness and nutrition. Okay. This one kind of goes right along with that. That is talking rather than listening. And so we talked about this on one of our more recent episodes with Coach Alyssa. But if you get on a coaching call and they spend the majority of the time talking rather than asking you questions or making you think and holding silence, great coaching happens in silence, in you thinking through things, in you not being given the answers. And so I coach a lot of coaches actually through a mentorship that I've been a part of. They have allowed me the opportunity to have like an office hour style call where I take Q&A from hundreds of coaches in the industry and coach them on coaching. And the thing that I'm noticing happens the most is that their clients become very dependent on them because they give them the answer all the time. So one example that I had happen this week is my coach came to me saying, hey, so my clients, like I get so many messages from all of my clients every single day. Like they'll send me like a picture of a menu at a restaurant, be like, what should I order? And so I asked her, I said, well, what do you say to that? Like, how do you answer that request? And she was like, well, I tell them what to order. And I was like, that's exactly the problem. And I get it. Some of you listening to this might be like, no, I want someone to tell me what to order. And it's true. Like there is a time and a place where like just having the answer is the most beneficial or the quickest thing. But what's going to be more beneficial to you in the long run is having a coach guide you through the thought process of how should you be thinking about ordering. So rather than saying, "Oh yeah, just pick this," it's okay, well, based on what we know about like and at this point they've probably learned about protein or fiber, how to plate their food, right? So they're not shooting in the dark. They're just trying to ask for help. They're panicking a little bit in the moment, right? It's like, let's take a deep breath. And based on what you know about protein and fiber, like what are kind of the top two options that you're looking at here? Right. And then from there, why are those the top two options? The client might say, well, I think like the chicken breast and broccoli or like the steak with potatoes. It's like, okay. And then, I mean, based on the context of like maybe how many calories you have left or, what our goals are, like which one of those really fits into that better? And is this moment a moment where you choose memories over macros or one where it's more beneficial for you to stick to the plan? Right. And then the client can kind of learn the thought process of when do I let, my emotional compass make decisions versus when do I let, the actual goal that I have make the decision in the moment and how do I think through that, right? Because then the client is not going to be coming to their coach every single day with what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? They start to learn how to think in their own life. And that's the value of coaching. Talking over listening and just kind of giving answers versus asking questions is a yellow flag. Like it's well intentioned, but again, it's just rookie coaches not knowing how to actually move someone through behavior change. Okay. Then focusing on the outcome, not the process. So this happens a lot as well when it comes to rookie coaches. And this is something that's really actually kind of funny because we try to teach our clients, right, to focus on the process rather than the outcome. But what happens as coaches when they're new is they tend to take a lot of whatever's happening with the client personally on them and their own coaching skills because they don't have the reps to know, like, am I good at this yet? And so if their client isn't losing weight, then they start to panic. Or if the client is not adhering to their nutrition exactly, then they start to panic. And one thing that I find myself coaching coaches through all the time on my office hour is, well, oh, this client's not losing weight. This client's not sticking to their nutrition. Like I've given them so many tips. Like, why aren't they doing this? And I'll start to pick apart, well, where were they when they started? Okay, they're 4 weeks in and they were not working out and they were eating a bunch of fast food when they started. Now, what does it look like, right? They're starting to cook from home more. They're actually getting more steps in. They're actually getting their workouts in. So like the process is happening. The weight's just kind of slow to catch up. So why are you panicking? And then they'll be like, that's a great question. And I'm like, so right now you're being outcome focused. What's going to happen if you're outcome focused? The client's going to become outcome focused because what you focus on is what guides them on what they're focusing on and which focus is going to get them the results in the long run. The outcome and feeling bad and like a failure when it's not happening fast enough, or the process and knowing that the results will come when the process is followed. And they're always like, the process. And it's like, okay, so are we actually in trouble here or are you lacking like the emotional regulation to see this clearly? Right. And that's really a downfall of rookie coaches is they care. They care a lot. They got into this line of work. They didn't get into this line of work for money for the most part, right? Recently, there's been more of a boom of like business coaches saying, make all this money with online coaching. But like usually people don't pivot to this industry when, you could go into software or finance or all these other industries where you can make so much more money. You don't go into this industry for money. You go into this industry because you love it and you care. And sometimes the lack of emotional compartmentalization can lead to that coach's downfall with their clients. Okay. So that's like kind of the next piece of rookie coaches making this mistake is lack of emotional regulation themselves. Right. And this can show up as exactly what I just described, focusing too much on the outcome. But also it can show up in much more negative ways, like blaming or shaming the client unintentionally, but because they're frustrated and they want the client to succeed, but it comes out sounding like, I thought you said you wanted this. Like, do you care enough to continue? Like, and kind of even positioning it as like, oh, they must not want it bad enough if they're not showing up the way that they should be. And getting frustrated when the client is not checking in on time, or the client is ghosting, and poor conflict resolution or escalation resolution skills, becoming emotionally reactive there and not really tempering the situation the way that it needs to be. Because the perspective that we always need to take as coaches is that like our clients are typically much more emotionally reactive, fearful, scared of failure, ashamed of themselves in this process than we are, right? Because we know how the scale works and our nutrition, and like we figured it out, and that's why we're coaching, right? And so we tend to like take clients' behaviors or lack of adherence or lack of appropriate or compliant behavior to mean something that it really doesn't. And the assumptions that coaches really make on what their clients are doing is really frustrating, because it's like those assumptions are hurting you. It's like a client ghosts, oh, they hate me, they don't trust the process, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, what if they just fell off and they're ashamed of themselves? Like, how would you approach this differently if that was the case, right? And most of the time it is like clients don't ghost because they are F this person, I'm going to go do something else. Like they typically ghost because they fell off, they feel like a failure, and they don't want to face you, right? So those are some ways that lack of emotional regulation and compartmentalization for coaches can really show up, and why being able to keep a neutral lens and a broader point of view is really important. And you really don't get that without years of experience. One of them that is just kind of honestly like a pet peeve of mine is coaches being trigger happy on reverse dieting and buying into the marketing hype themselves. So things like reverse dieting or functional health testing or labs. I see a lot of rookie and newbie coaches kind of almost falling for marketing themselves because they don't understand the science at a deeper level. And so what I mean by that is I see, like, for example, I've had a client, or not a client, sorry, a coach come to me with a client that was over 250 pounds, not a tall person, right? Not a man that's 6'3" and 250, but like a woman, 5'4", 250, right? So lots of excess body fat to lose, lots of insulin resistance, metabolically unhealthy, metabolically dysfunctional, right? So her metabolism is not functioning the way that it should be. And she came to me saying, like, this person's tracking their food, they're only eating like 1,000 calories a day. I need to raise her calories up. I need to reverse diet her and put her, into a position where she's metabolically healthy. And there were many things wrong with this assumption. Number one, the logging is probably far from accurate, and there's probably a lot of things that are not logged that this client is consuming for them to be, that amount of weight. And honestly, it's not because they're trying to hide. Like, a lot of times it's literally just ignorance. It's just like, I don't know that soda has calories. Like, my husband literally told me that, like, before he met me, he did not realize that soda had calories. And then now he looks back, he's like, that was 240 grams of sugar that I was drinking a day. And I'm like, yeah, dude, like that's kind of gross. And he just didn't know, right? So a lot of times it's like the client's actually trying to track everything that they're eating, but they just don't know that their coffee has calories, their soda has calories, all these things, right? And so it's like a lack of like being able to just peel into the bigger picture with your clients, and have that open communication to help them understand where their calories are actually at. Because most clients, there's data, research to show that when people track their food, they tend to underestimate by a huge margin. Second, however, if somebody is truly insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, diabetic, really overweight, reverse dieting is not the answer for them. Raising your calories up to this theoretical maintenance point is most likely going to cause them to gain weight, because when you increase calories on an inactive person who is metabolically unhealthy, they're just going to keep storing body fat. And so I'm not saying starve this person, but what we actually need in that situation, right, is an accurate viewpoint on what their calories really are, and slowly bringing that down over time, and increasing movement, increasing protein, increasing fiber, and just getting a more balanced lifestyle in place, and the weight will come off, right? But what I see happen is, like, because of marketing and sales in this industry getting so potent and popular, that some of the best marketers put out this amazing content on why, like, when you're not losing weight, you need to reverse diet, you need to restore your metabolism, you need to get functional testing, gut issues, hormone issues, all these things. And newbie coaches literally look at that and they're like, oh my God, all of my clients need a reverse diet, when like most of them just need to be more accurate, more consistent, more honest, and in more of a calorie deficit. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves, is that trigger happiness for sure, because it's out of naivety and it's also out of ignorance on the coach's part of like not actually understanding the research or the physiology behind any of this, and just coaching based on their own experience, their own case studies with themselves or friends, and not actually having physiological knowledge about this, which is, a problem in the industry as well. It's just people who are not truly qualified to be doing this work, because handling people's diets, bodies, physiology, like that's not light work, right? That's like really people trusting you with their health, right? So for coaches, if you listen to this, just do more research, follow more evidence-based practitioners, study more, know more about the physiology. Okay. And then let's see, operating out of scope. So this is an interesting one of like operating out of scope, meaning if you are a coach and you're certified in say like nutrition and training, maybe even mindset, there are still lines that you should not cross. For example, our coaching business is extremely, extremely heavy on the mindset. And I have clients all the time that comment like, oh, my therapist, or like, this is like, we're overlapping these topics of like, oh, I talked about like something that kind of came up like tangentially to this in therapy actually. So it's interesting that these things are related. But it's not your job as a coach to unpack someone's childhood trauma. It's not your job as a coach to give people life advice, right? It's not your job as a coach to be a therapist. Okay. There is a difference between giving someone tools that are relevant to their health and fitness adherence and journey, and being a therapist. And the line for me, and where I look at this, is what relevance does it have to the client's success in their fitness goal that they brought to us? And there are things that will come up that overlap, but I'm not handling the thing that came up that overlaps. I'm handling how it affects the health and fitness. Right. And that's where a lot of coaches tend to go out of scope, and they start to get emotionally burnt out because they're taking on emotional labor that they shouldn't be. Right. Here's the last one that I think I will go through because my camera's about to overheat. Projecting your life values onto the clients and assuming that you get it when you don't. This is a story of a client that I've been working with for over 4 or 5 years now, I think. And he taught me a lesson that I really, really needed. So he's a 40-something-year-old man, has 2 kids, works in a really successful company, a really high up position, and has a lot of responsibility on his plate. At the time when this happened, I did not have a team yet. I had not scaled my business yet. I didn't have the responsibility that I do now. And he was struggling to adhere, struggling with his plan. And he was like, life is just so crazy right now. And what I said to him was something to the tune of, I get it, but let's make this work. You got to make it happen. Like, I understand, but no, right? And he came back to me and said, I appreciate you trying, but you don't get it. And I'm a little offended by the fact that you think that you do. I have so much more responsibility than you in my life, and I'm not using that to play the victim, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't say that you get it and just coach me through what I need. And, that was a point where if I did not have humility, he probably would have fired me the next day. And I probably wouldn't have learned my lesson. And I probably would have had a lot of other clients feel like they're not seen, they're not heard, and they're not actually appropriately helped by me. But I took that as a huge wake up call, and I was like, you're right. I don't get it. I'm 21 years old at this time. Oh no, I was probably like 23. I was like 23 years old at the time, not a lot of life responsibility. And I was telling this man with so much on his plate that I get it. You don't. And when you work in the fitness industry full time, guess what? You make your own schedule. You center your life around health and fitness. Like, you have to live the example. So it's a higher priority in your life than it is for the average person. So you don't get it, but you can choose to understand what that might feel like. You can have empathy still, but you cannot actually understand. And that's where it's really harmful to project your own life values onto theirs, right? Just because I'm sober with alcohol doesn't mean that my clients want to be, right? Just because don't drink caffeine anymore doesn't mean that my clients won't. Just because I like to work out in the morning or the evening doesn't mean that they have to. And so when you try to force the client into a box of this is how it worked for me, and like, I get it, life is stressful, but make it work. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. That's where you lose them. That's where you lose them. So those are just a few mistakes that rookie coaches make that I deal with and coach coaches through, thankfully, on a day-to-day. basis with the privileges that I have, which I'm so grateful for. And hopefully you as a client, as a consumer, hear this and either can relate to your past experiences or feel like you understand what you actually should be looking for in a coach moving forward. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I appreciate your attention because I know it's the most valuable resource that you have. And we'll see you back here next week for the next episode.